When people ask me, what's Schoology? I don't just respond with, it's a learning management system. I tell them to imagine an online hub that houses teachers, students, parents, and any and all stakeholders, but to share any materials for class, documents, links, images, videos, activities, and discussions, anything you want. Students have access to these materials anytime from anywhere. Teachers can create dynamic learning experiences in Schoology to make differentiation a possibility. To learn more about Schoology and how they can help you advance what's possible, visit Schoology.com.
That's my cue for a hot take.
Okay.
Fight with me, Glenn. Fight with me. Welcome to OnEducation. I'm Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We're going to give you some thoughts on some of our favorite free apps and tools, and whether it's worth paying for them once the company decides to monetize them. We're also excited to chat with our first OnEducation teacher, Joe Lynch. And we're pumped to wrap up this episode with some questions about podcasting from one of our listeners' students.
But before we get started, we've got a couple quick hits here to tell you about. First off, we're number 9 in the iTunes charts for educational technology. I kind of screwed up putting us in that category. We meant to be in the education, but either way, it doesn't matter. Number 9.
That's ridiculous. That's amazing.
Insane. It was insane. And I kept watching it, right? I'm like, we're number 100 and whatever on earlier in the week, and then number 45 on Friday. And then last night you sent me a message.
I know.
You're number 9, and I just about lost my mind.
When I texted you, I said, is this right? I figured it was something. I figured something was wrong, or that I was looking in the wrong place. So yeah, that's why I sent you that text message. That's awesome.
So either way, thank you, first off.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Please tell your friends, share. This is how we grow, and this is how we want to do good stuff. We want you to love it. We want you to be informed. I've had at least 3 or 4 people who aren't even teachers at all that listen and say, I think it's cool to listen to this because I'm getting a sense of how teachers think. And that's an awesome piece of feedback for us.
That is amazing feedback. Anybody that has feedback for us, please send it to us. We have a place on our site to be able to do that. Correct, Mike?
Yeah. Down at the bottom, oneducationpodcast.com. There's a place you can put whatever you want in there. It goes into a big spreadsheet that I look at a couple times a week to see what's going on. And we love the feedback. And Twitter's been awesome. Twitter was crazy. This is easily my biggest week on Twitter in terms of activity. Your Twitter account also was crazy this week for many reasons that we're going to get into.
It's blowing up all over the place. Lots of controversy and lots of good stuff. I love discussions on Twitter.
Right. And it goes to show that we definitely want this podcast to be a community. And we're really going to try to, as we continue to go here, develop the community aspect of it with different things that we have in mind. The second thing I want to talk about Fortnite for a second. So
Fortnite.
You're gonna get video game talk from us fairly often. I play video games a lot. Glenn plays them a lot. We've both played Fortnite, but more importantly, everyone in the friggin' world is playing Fortnite right now.
Yes.
And kids are playing it in class. There's this really cool story floating around of a university professor telling his kids not to play Fortnite anymore. And that message ended up getting to Epic Games, who then put it as one of those little blurbs in the loading screen.
No way.
Mr. Whatever his name tells you to stop playing Fortnite in class. It comes up randomly every once in a while. This isn't totally new. I used to play Civilization in class all the time. Don't, do as I say, not as I do. And being a history major, Civilization is my jam. What makes this game different than others, Glenn?
I think the biggest difference, well, number one, it's free. So that's a huge difference in other games. It's really attracting a lot of people to play the game because you don't have to pay to be able to initially start being able to play. The other part I really enjoy is that it has this creative, also kind of high level thinking aspect to it with all of the building that you can do within the game. The graphics aren't super amazing over the top, which actually I think lets the servers run at a faster rate. So you can really get in on a lot of games in a shorter period of time. But those are just my opinions. What do you think?
I think it's awesome. It's a new genre. I mean, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds and now Fortnite, this battle royale mode where you take 100 people and just throw them in a map and you go crazy, almost Hunger Games style, though not as gory, obviously, as Hunger Games. I love the art style. I think it reminds me a little bit of like World of Warcraft. It's got that cartoonish type style, which is definitely attractive to younger people. And it's super accessible. It's not hard for you to just jump in and figure things out. And I mean, I let my son play Fortnite. He plays it in the kitchen. We have this computer set up in the kitchen, so we have pretty easy access to what he does and what he's looking at and listening to. And frankly, I don't see this game any worse than anything else you can do in multiplayer, like a Minecraft server. So it's accessible. Kids can get in this and do it. I am curious. Does you have an older kid? Actually, I think you have a kid that's just around my son's age as well. Do you let your son play Fortnite? And do you think this is an appropriate age for a game like this? Because all the kids are playing it, so I'm curious.
So my 10-year-old has taught me to play Fortnite, and we actually play multiplayer with his grandfather, who's in his 60s, and fun. he lives in North Dakota, and that's actually who his main partner is as far as on all the things. So it's kind of nice because they are on Xbox Live in a group chat together, him and his grandfather, and there's a safety net there for me. So we know exactly who he's talking with or communicating with. Just like you, I actually enjoy watching him play. I like talking strategy and lots of other things like that. And I think the game itself is cartoonish. And even though you're going around and, throwing missiles at people or other kinds of weapons or whatever it might be, there's no blood. So at a 10-year-old level, I think it's totally fine. Again, that's just my own opinion about it. Yeah. And that's why I think the game is so super popular and parents aren't minding it as much. It's not a Call of Duty type of game where there's actually blood and gore or those kinds of things. It's when you actually shoot someone, it even tells you something different. Even when you die, it doesn't say you're dead or something. It has like a little different type of messaging in it. And then the different features, how it differentiates itself from a normal kind of Call of Duty type of game, I think, is that there's so much strategy involved. Sure. And it's not just going around and shooting people. There's all of these different elements that are part of the game, including those building elements, which I think are fantastic.
Well, the building elements are the funniest thing about it, because speaking of strategy, that is the strategy, right? Is to build yourself almost like a base. So you got to run around and find some wood, break up things to get the wood and the metal. And so you can, when you're under attack, you can literally like build a tower to the sky. You see these people building towers to get out of the way of people attacking you. One of the things I wanted to mention, I actually have a bit of back channel communication here. I don't know how this started, but I have a pretty good line of communication with an executive at Epic Games. And I've been trying to push this executive who would be able to actually say, yes, let's do this, to turn Fortnite into a platform. Very much almost the same as they did with Minecraft, to teach kids programming, specifically teaching them Unreal Engine. You actually mentioned this in the last podcast, talking about people staying in an ecosystem or being locked in through brand loyalty and stuff like that. And Apple has an opportunity to, lock people into iPads and stuff like that. I think that Epic Games is really missing an opportunity here. And I'm totally sending a link to this podcast to my contact there, because I want him to hear it from me, and I want him to hear it from you, because I'm 90% sure we agree on this, and I want everyone listening to hear this too, that I think Epic is missing a huge opportunity to take the most popular game in the world and turn it into a learning platform for Unreal Engine and programming. And then they've literally locked in an entire demographic of kids who are going to learn how to use their engine and not learn how to use Amazon's engine or any other engine, from EA or whatever. They're going to be Unreal Engine people. And they're going to, when they go on to develop their own games, they're going to use Unreal Engine. So my thought is, if kids love it, let's leverage this game, this amazing game, to do some teaching. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that you have something, a really good point there, Mike. Really, this is the time. It's very, very hot. The game is. We can go ahead and use, like you just said, the actual graphics engine and the coding that's included in it to be able to teach kids how do you design your own games then from this point. This is how they did it. Now we're going to use this exact same engine, and now you will learn how to go in and create your own game elements. And I mean, this is such a huge industry as far as the gaming industry, and great skills that kids can learn. I mean, even at age 10, I mean, I think that you're exactly right. I hope that they're open to that idea, and then that they have some sort of collaboration to be able to create some sort of ability for kids to be able to use the platform to code.
It's an incredible opportunity. I've literally given these guys a roadmap on how to do this. They asked me to write it up. So I wrote up how you would do this. And I said, let's go. I need a small team. I could take 10 people, and I bet you I could have this in 5 years. And they haven't bitten on it, but I'm hoping with a little bit of peer pressure, we can get this going.
You're their educational consultant.
Well, I certainly should be. I want to talk about two serious things for a minute. The first one is, tragic. This weekend there was an accident. This isn't related to education, but it's an important thing to talk about, and I want to express some condolences. The hockey team Humboldt Broncos, they're a junior hockey team in Western Canada. There was a bus accident with their team bus, and 15 of the team members died in this brutal crash. It's really quite sad. It's captivated the attention of all of Canada. But most importantly, I want to bring light to the fact that there's a GoFundMe campaign started to support things that they need money for going forward. We're going to put the GoFundMe link into the show notes for this. So that's that. I also want to talk very quickly because this was supposed to be quick hits, and it's becoming 20-minute hits. That we're going to spend more and more time talking about this. I'm sure the Oklahoma strikes, and there's been lots of other teacher strikes happening. But I'm an informed outside observer of American education. Being a Canadian, I think that, frankly, that's why I might be the person perfect to talk about this. It's clear that there's a war on education going on, a war on academia happening in the U.S., in particular in the southern U.S. It's been bad for years, frankly, maybe even decades. And it seems to me that teachers have just had enough. We're done. They're done. And I saw a video that blew my mind on Facebook on, I think it was Friday, of someone going through like an Oklahoma school and just showing how absolutely run down it is. And then they're saying, this isn't about money. Look at this school. It's disgusting. These strikes seem to be working. What do you think?
I think that they're not only working, I think people are now listening. Other teachers are now becoming empowered and saying, if they can do this, we can also do this. And what we're really talking about is just making sure that we pay attention to the inadequate amount of educational funding. And I mean, I'm sure you know this, Mike, but most of our funding in the United States for education comes from within our own states. So state administrations are so important, and their decisions of how they decide to go ahead and fund at each different state is so different, and it varies so much that within, you cross a border, your school district could receive so a huge, vast difference amount of money than someone in your neighboring state. So those kinds of inequities are coming to light. The pay for these teachers is coming to light, and now we see it in Oklahoma, and it's going to, I believe, in Arizona. This is also happening, and of course, we had West Virginia, I believe, was where we had it a few weeks ago. And I love that. Anybody that wants to go ahead and come on to our show and talk about these specific things and bring light of what's happening within your schools and school districts or states. As far as the criticism, I saw a state governor of Oklahoma criticizing the teachers for doing this, calling them begging teenagers or something about teenagers.
Unbelievable.
Yes, and just being critical of kind of these are just super important, awesome people that really give their lives to kids and making them better people, and they're just not being adequately paid.
Listen, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to notice the differences between the states and their quality of education, and then also extrapolate from that what government is running them. When you have governments that don't care about fact and science and reality, that translates to education exactly this way. You have bathrooms that don't work. You have textbooks that are falling apart. It's not rocket science, people. Vote, please, for the love of God, vote, and keep striking, because education's everything, and teaching should be incredibly expensive. Education needs to be one of the most expensive things that you do as a government, as a society, and it's obviously not happening in some states. And it's time that we fix that. When we come back, we're going to talk about, speaking of money, we're going to talk about apps, and we're going to talk about money for a bit. All right, welcome back. We are going to talk a little bit about some apps and monetization. This week, a very popular free tool called Padlet sent out notices to its customers that they were going to monetize. Glenn, give us a rundown on what happened, how much it's going to cost teachers.
Well, this week we received notice when you log into Padlet, they decided that it was time to pay for their services. Previously, Padlet was a free app that you could use unlimitedly with all of their function and all functionality. But now, if you want to use more than a few Padlets, you'll have to pay $99 a year for their service, which is really expensive. I like Padlet. I've used it in my courses and my classes. I've used it for professional development, but I'm definitely not going to pay $100 for it. And I really don't think many teachers will pay for it. Would you, Mike?
Well, I have a couple thoughts related to this. And no, first off, no, I'm not going to pay $100 for Padlet. But I suppose my first thought, though, is a little contrary to what I just said, in the sense that making software is hard. Making good software is even harder. And people need to get paid. This industry, there seems to be only a few viable revenue models for, video games and social networks and stuff. And that's either ads or subscriptions. So I empathize, I should say, with Padlet in the sense that I'm sure that they want to invest in their company. I'm sure they want to invest in the product. And it's really hard, I bet, to raise funding and dump more money into equity when a company has a limited revenue stream. The reality is that not everything can be free. If you like something, you should pay for it.
Yes, that is true, Mike. I agree with you on some bits here, but really, I guess we as teachers have to decide how far are we going to go into our own pockets to pay for apps like Padlet or anything else that becomes monetized. And I guess those are personal decisions. And my other thought in my head was, is Padlet a good enough tool, actually a great enough tool to be monetizing it at this level?
100%. I mean, we seem to be drowning in apps that do a lot of the same thing, to be honest. And, with choice, it comes down to, it seems like this is an app that probably can't afford to lose a lot of their install base with a paywall. And there's a lot of other competitors. It's a really tough spot for Padlet to be in. They need to pay their people. They need to improve their product. But, what do teachers do if they enjoyed Padlet, but they don't have money to pay for it?
I think that there's a lot of alternatives already. Some are coming up. And if you look on Twitter on #Padlet, you'll find that people are posting 10 alternatives to Padlet, free alternative to Padlet. I'm not going to promote any specific company as far as that goes, but you can go ahead and go on there and find yourself something that's comparable.
Unless they pay us.
Yes, if you want to go ahead and pay us and sponsor us, we are more than welcome. I will promote you.
Promote away.
Yes, and I will include you in each segment. But really what I was thinking about too is there are some alternatives, and I am going to mention one because I use it, that has basically a Padlet type of functionality embedded inside of a much robust system, and that's Nearpod. Nearpod has an activity that that's called the collaborative activity. And honestly, it's basically just Padlet, but it's just one functionality in a big ecosystem of things that you can use as a teacher to be able to go ahead and communicate with your students when you're delivering a lesson plan. So that would be one thing. Now, of course, we have free alternatives that are just out there that you can kind of modify. A Google Doc, for example, or a slide or whatever it might be, that is that you share collaboratively with your class, can also work in the same way that a Padlet worked in. It just depends on how much work you're willing to do on the teacher side of it.
So you brought up a tweet.
Here's that tweet.
About teachers pay teachers. I'm going to quote you.
Yes, quote me.
Quote, teachers already have to use so much of their own money in their classrooms. Exploiting them with sites like #teachers pay teachers, they're not going to be happy with that, is wrong, IMO. What if we just shared everything we created with each other for the good of the students? So.
I know we don't agree on this one.
I love the premise. It sounds nice. You're a nice guy, Glen. Maybe I'm just not. I don't know. But anyways, this might be the first thing we even kind of sort of disagree on. So full disclosure, I have a Teachers Pay Teachers account. I charge for a couple of things. My opinion on this has very little to do with that. Trust me, Teachers Pay Teachers is not paying the mortgage. In fact, what it actually is paying for is my World of Warcraft account subscription. So it comes to my PayPal account. World of Warcraft comes out of my PayPal account. That's what you're paying for when you buy my stuff on Teachers Pay Teachers, people. Thank you very much.
Funding your gaming.
You're feeding my gaming habit, my online gaming subscription. So some people, though, do invest a lot of time and energy into what they put there. I imagine that there's people where this is either close to their job or maybe is their job. I don't see it a whole lot more different than, especially for these people who do big things on Teachers Pay Teachers, a whole lot more different than writing a book. or a resource manual that gets published and then gets sold. Where's the line, Glenn, between what you invest your time in and your experience in and your knowledge in, things that you had to pay money to acquire, and then offer it for free out of some moral obligation to teacherhood?
Well, I don't know if it's a moral obligation, but I think that I have a huge disdain for teachers pay teachers. I also have an account, but I actually created the account so that I could give all my stuff away.
So you can make a point.
And you can go to Herb Spanish, Teachers Pay Teachers, and take any of my stuff, by the way. And really what I'm talking about is, would you, Mike, and this is the, I guess the argument against this is, if you had a teacher right next door, for me, a Spanish teacher right next door, and they were teaching the same, content, Spanish 1 or 2 or whatever it might be, would I not just share my materials with them? And then what makes them so different than someone in another state or in another country? And really, the point of me sharing my really, really good lesson, by the way, you're not just sharing your trash, you're sharing your really good stuff, the stuff that really worked. And that's what you find on Teachers Pay Teacher, I believe. I mean, there's trash, of course, but people are sharing things that they are passionate about, that they've put a lot of work into, just like you said. And the point is of these lessons, units, or whatever they've created, is that it has worked with students, or at least that's what they're proposing. So if those things have worked with students and are really like, they hook people in and they're just doing such a great job, why would you then charge someone for it if you know they could impact so many more students? And that's what really I'm about, is I'm not a nice person. It's that I want to pass it on. And I do that all the time on my Twitter account too, is anytime I gather something, I want to share it with somebody. And sometimes it's a person I want to share with someone else, say, hey, I want to connect you to this person. Because I think that as a teaching profession, and it's global now, I think all of us, it's so easy for us to talk and share ideas, that even our ideas of what we share as far as lesson plans in class and units and those things, those can make a big difference in someone else's class. And maybe it will spark an idea from your idea to even make it that much better. But that's my rant about Teachers Pay Teachers.
No, I guess I'm still just not sure where the line is. I mean, we obviously see that lots of people are putting little things, worksheets, crossword puzzles, miscellaneous small things on Teachers Pay Teachers. And I don't have a problem saying those things should be free. In fact, I do have free things on my Teachers Pay Teachers account. What I'm wondering is, what if people put like pretty substantive things? Like, what if you wrote basically a book? It could have been a small book, 15, 20 pages, a curriculum, a whole curriculum. Is that something that should also be free on Teachers Pay Teachers if you put it up there?
Yes, I think so. I think so, but it's because I just have a different philosophy. I think that textbook companies are horrible. I think that that's the monetization of that industry is part of the reason why we get held back on things, and not being able to share those ideas freely as teachers, as educators, and then being able to pass those ideas on to our students. Because what we want to do as far as teachers, I think, is you want to be able to deliver the best lessons every single day. Now, we all know that a lot of times isn't a possibility. And most of the time, the reason why is because of time. You just don't have the time to be able to invest in, making that every single day be that boom day, where you're delivering amazing stuff. But if we all collaborate together as, the power of all of us teachers in whatever the content areas, I think we can do a lot of things. But again, that's just my opinion.
I mean, time is a finite resource, man. And I'm busy. I got lots of things going on, and I only can choose to do the things that are worth my time. There's an opportunity cost here, to use a really cool economics term that I love, but the value of the things I'm not doing versus the value of the things I'm doing, and which one is worth more to me. And if I'm going to invest a whole bunch of time into a substantial resource, I'm writing a book. And now I'm curious if you are expecting. I mean, I'd give you a copy anyways, Glenn, because I love you. But
I get a free copy. Yes.
Sure, I'll even sign up for you, man. But I'm writing a book, and it's a curriculum in a book. Like literally, you can take this book, and when you get it, you will have basically me holding your hand through a high level computer studies curriculum. And I'm wondering whether you're going to make me put it out there for free now, buddy.
I'm not going to make you do anything, but we should ask our audience, don't you think?
Sure.
Yes.
So we are interested in what you think about this. Well, Glenn is for sure. He wants to win this, I think.
I do.
Should teachers give their resources away for free, or should they be charging people for their work? We want the internet to weigh in. So we will be posting a poll Tuesday afternoon. This pod should be out on Tuesday morning, and we're going to see what the internet says. And Glenn will surely win because he's nicer than I am. And I would just want to make money, clearly. I don't know.
You greedy guy.
I don't know where I just don't know where the line is. I don't know how big of a thing it needs to be before you're allowed to earn an income from it. I mean, we sell sponsorships here. Like, we're going to be selling underwear at some point. We've talked about this. And at
fancy
some point,
underwear.
Well, it is fancy underwear.
For those tough days on the education job.
These ads are ridiculous, by the way, where they talk about the underwear being the best part of your life.
I know. It feels so good while you're teaching that lesson.
Your life improves substantially after wearing this underwear. But, I mean, should this podcast be ad-free? Does it make me a bad person, or maybe not a bad? I know you're not saying I'm a bad person. I know that.
No.
But I don't know where the line is between you leveraging the knowledge and experience that you specifically have and are willing to impart into other people, or for other people, I should say. And when at some point you deserve to be compensated for that knowledge and experience. It's an interesting topic, and the internet's going to tell us what they think. When we come back, we're going to talk to our first OnEducation teacher, Joe Lynch. Welcome back. Glenn and I started OnEducation for lots of reasons. We wanted to talk about the day-to-day teaching. We want to address challenges and concerns educators are dealing with in everything from classroom management to politics. We want OnEducation to be a community. We certainly plan to have some laughs and hopefully provide some sort of inspiration to our listeners. To that end, we're launching a segment called OnEducation Teacher. We all know these teachers. They're amazing, a force in the classroom, and a leader at your school. The only problem is your staff are the only ones who know how special they really are. We're trying to put these teachers front and center. We want you to be in awe of them, just like we are. We're going to talk to them and see what makes them tick. Hopefully you'll come away learning something and being inspired. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Joe Lynch. Joe is the art teacher at Richmond Hill Montessori and Elementary Private School in Richmond Hill, Ontario. He is the art teacher at the school I work at. He's a colleague of mine and someone I really admire. Thanks, Joe, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, gentlemen. I've really enjoyed listening to your show so far. I think the podcast is obviously long overdue, so thank you for all your hard work so far.
Thank you. So before we get started, first question I wanted to ask, I wanted you to kind of give the listeners a little bit of a rundown on kind of how you got here, your path, your bio, how long you've been teaching, and maybe what inspired you to be a teacher in the first place.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm wrapping up my 6th year as a full-time teacher. And like you already said, I'm the fine arts and drama teacher at a private school in the GTA. I teach grades 3 to 8. So that's almost 400 kids. And initially, I didn't grow up wanting to be in education. I wanted to work for Disney or play for the Blue Jays, as many kids would dream of in Toronto. But I always enjoyed school. I love learning, participating in school events, and I really cherish the social aspect of school. While I was in university, I worked at a fine arts camp for the city of Toronto. I was initially hired as a video instructor, and I worked with kids on writing, directing, and creating ridiculous short films with homemade props. So that was back in the VHS days. So if you've ever seen Be Kind Rewind with Jack Black, it's kind of like that. But ultimately, I had a lot of fun sharing my knowledge with students, and they laughed at all my jokes. So I felt like I was a bit of a talk show host. And that kind of sparked my initiation into education. I decided to go to teachers college after that. So from that experience, I really feel I had a chance to be dynamic when delivering my lessons, and it still affects my teaching today.
Nice. That's awesome. Every year. So I mean, I've seen some of this stuff you've done. I've seen some of that old stuff. It's absolutely incredible, and I love how absolutely unique some of this stuff is. Speaking of unique, we run an event every year at our school called the Art Cafe. It's easily one of the coolest events I've ever seen a school put on. And totally was your idea, your baby. I just kind of jumped on the train. I started a year after you had started. So I just kind of jumped on. Tell us about the Art Cafe. Tell us about how you came up with the idea, a little bit about what it is and how cool it is, really.
I can try. Yeah. So Art Cafe is definitely a mutation from my experience at an art camp. And I'm sure you can attest, Mike, that we work at a fantastic school and they support our wild ideas. So our school, I don't know if you've mentioned this in previous podcasts, is definitely renowned for their success in academics. It's great how competitive the students are in terms of like the scholastic competitions. However, when I look at the handful of award winners, I also saw the majority of amazing kids who didn't get a chance to really shine or to get that spotlight. So I wanted to change that and create an opportunity where all of our students could be recognized. And therefore, the Art Cafe was an event that included every student in the school. And I know you and I hope that all of our students will achieve a sense of pride and community that, you know, sometimes lacking in academic competitions. And viewing art in person would definitely build that community in a real and true social network. I've definitely been blessed to work with amazing teachers who commit their evenings to support us, throwing all of that stuff together. And obviously, since its inception, Mike and I have tried to push the boundaries of what one would expect to see at an elementary art exhibition. We try to change a theme every year to keep it fresh and, more importantly, to challenge ourselves. But it's a great opportunity to have our school community come in and see students playing jazz and hear them playing jazz in the hallway. We have giant, bright, elaborate displays of artwork that kind of transforms the school environment. We have digital projections that are made in Mike's class on smart boards. It's a great experience. I know we definitely look forward to it every year, and there's always something new. Like last year, we introduced the Google Tilt Brush to have interactive collective artworks on display. It's really fun.
Yeah, the VR thing last year blew people's minds. We had a lineup all the way down the hall to do Tilt Brush in a kind of a collaborative VR demonstration of art, which is pretty rad. It definitely, I think, opened up some people's eyes as to what you can do with art and technology and VR. Everyone who came away from that said, wow, I mean, you can do some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of art and technology, we work really closely together. I'm the computer teacher, you're the art teacher, and we work together a lot. And I frankly, I dare anyone to show me a teacher who uses technology in an art class like you do. Give us an idea of what you're doing in art with technology and some of the assignments or tasks or work that you've put together with your students.
Sure. Yeah. So just like I know, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago, Apple had that big kind of conference and talked about how exciting it is to be a student these days, but I really think it's exciting to be a teacher. Every day is a little different in terms of what we're trying to kind of push ourselves or how to integrate technology. And you and I both kind of geek out on new apps and tools and how we can try to incorporate them into their classrooms. And I've told you before that I obviously didn't become a teacher to become a millionaire. However, I do feel like we've hit the jackpot getting hired out of school with such a remarkable vision on wanting to integrate technology. We have a lot of cool toys, obviously. But more importantly, I try to use technology not for technology's sake, but to help students learn deeper and appreciate art in different ways. And I'm definitely always conscious of trying to build a bridge between maybe something that's a little more like archaic and something that's a little more contemporary and meaningful to them. This year, I've introduced an app called Procreate in the classroom. I have a class set of iPads. I'm very fortunate for that. And we've been goofing around with augmented reality. But something that I've really found refreshing is that by introducing some of these cool apps into my drawing classes, I've been seeing that students have been wanting to go back and rework and revise their artwork before submitting it, which is always a chore to have the students really look at the rubric or the assignments requirements to make sure that they're meeting all of that. But I feel now the majority of them are exceeding those expectations.
I guess it's a lot harder, isn't it, to revise your art on paper, like when you're drawing or painting. It's hard, right? You almost, in some cases, if you make a major mistake or like have a reimagining of something you want, you almost have to start again. One of the coolest things, I guess, about something like Procreate would be that you can, click the eraser tool and erase it, and you're not really having to start again, right?
No, definitely. And art, I would say, is one of the more intimidating subjects, especially in terms of dexterity issues, or definitely if you don't have a passion for art, it can be frustrating when what you're trying to work on isn't articulated as well as you would like. When kids are drawing, I try to tell them to draw light till you get it right, just because if you make that mistake, it can kind of ruin it for you. But Procreate and other apps really put a new spin on the art creation process, and kids are developing different layers that you can hide and, pull up different layers and definitely share them with your friends to at least get some sort of like partner feedback. And, art for the most part is a very personal process, but I really feel using Procreate, for example, just because I've been implementing it this year, has really created a great collaborative community of creation in my classroom.
Hey, Joe, this is Glen. I wanted to ask you a question. One of the things that I get excited about, number one, I get excited about listening to teachers like you that integrate technology for a true purpose. What advice would you give like a recent university graduate about incorporating technology into an art course? Because I think that could be intimidating for them.
Oh, definitely. That's a great question. So actually, Mike and I were kind of talking about this the other day, where I think it's okay to take risks. Like we tell our students that all the time. And for the most part, when you see, let's use an app or, for example, and you want to try to use it, it may not fit. But I think you really need to take that plunge, and sometimes going feet first in to see if it'll work or not. I know that it's important that we share with our kids that, nobody's perfect. And, I know teachers definitely aren't either. The first time you implement an app or trying to integrate some technology, you're going to find some bugs in your lesson, and it's really important to rework those. And if it doesn't stick, then it's okay if it didn't work.
100%. Teachers, we were just talking about this the other day, and the idea that teachers need to be not afraid to fail, just like we tell our kids to not be fearful of getting something wrong. In the history of everything that works, there was a point in time when it didn't work, and we continue to iterate and work on these things until we get them right. And being someone who's always on the edge of delivering really cool educational technology lessons and integrated lessons, there's going to be things that don't work. and you got to be not afraid of letting things go a little off the rails. Sometimes, to be honest, when things go off the rails, you learn something new that you weren't even expecting before.
Mm.
One of the, I guess, the last things I want to talk, and this is, to be honest, this is, as much as I think you're an amazing teacher when it comes to art and technology, the art cafe is mind-blowing, and really you got to be there to see it. But, seeing art all through the halls and in the gym, and how many people come and just to look, pretty awesome. But I really, really wanted to talk to you about school leadership. And I'm a huge believer in the idea that anyone can have an opportunity to stand up and lead. I don't think you have to be an administrator to be someone that your school respects and listens to. I don't think you have to be an administrator to have a voice in the room and to be heard, and for your thoughts on maybe even things that are outside of your area of expertise in terms of the classroom, to be respected and have opinions on other things. It's not something, though, that is just handed to you. Non-admin leadership is something you have to work for. And this is all leading up to saying that I think you're an amazingly strong leader for our school, and our staff respect you, look up to you, seek your advice on everything, not just art. Absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts in general on school leadership, how important it is to have strong leaders, both on the admin side, but also on the non-admin side, and how a teacher, a teaching team member, can carve out a niche for themselves as a leader at their school.
Wow, thanks for the compliment, Mike. I'll try my best to answer that. So I think effective school leadership is realized when it doesn't necessarily come from administration. I think senior staff can be some great role models in order to take that initiative to step up and inspire maybe some newer coworkers. But I think it's really important to state that as long as you instill and cultivate and manage a culture of openness and trust, that would be maybe one of the first steps. And I think any staff member can take on that leadership role. If you think about it this way, it can kind of maybe start in like 3 different phases. I think it starts with the classroom first. So you need to be confident in your own classroom and really model what you want from our students too. I know that student-led learning is a really big buzzword these days. So as long as you're taking charge and maybe implementing some new initiatives, or like we were mentioning before, integrating some new technology, taking a risk there, I think you can really inspire your students. And then ultimately, you can move on to creating some initiatives at the school. We had mentioned Art Cafe before. Mike and I also run a school-wide lip dub, which is a giant music video to wrap up the end of the school year. And I think, you and I have both taken some leads to kind of bring the school together in that regard. And then ultimately, you could take initiatives outside of the school. So either getting involved in your local community for food drives or for fundraising. And in terms of the art, creating like mural projects to definitely let the community know that your school is there and is integral to everything in the surroundings.
Awesome. It's amazing. Joe, thanks for coming on. I think this has been great. Joe, I don't think Joe has a Twitter account yet. I'm working on it. We're going to put a bit of Joe's information and biography on our website. We have a page dedicated exclusively to OnEducation Teachers. It's in the menu at the top when you go to OnEducationPodcast.com. And specifically when Joe creates a Twitter account, we will put that up there as well. And then we will make sure that Joe gets 1 million Twitter followers.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
We got to get him 1 million.
Yeah, absolutely. He'll outfollow us. Joe, thanks for coming on. This has been great.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, gentlemen.
Welcome back. This is one of the segments when Glen and I were drawing out a roadmap for the podcast that I was most excited about. I know I've said it a million times, but we really want this podcast to become a community of listeners and to be more of a participatory experience. One of the best ways we can do that is by taking questions. This week, we were lucky to receive some questions from the students of Liberty Benton Middle School in Findlay, Ohio, and their teacher, Melissa. They really wanted to know what it was like to start a podcast. What a cool opportunity for students to make connections with the world. Let's get into these.
I'm pretty excited about this. We actually have questions from students who are interested in podcasting. I mean, that is awesome. So the first questions are from a group, Luke, AJ, and Samuel. And I'm going to read the questions, and then I'm just going to give you my synopsis of it. And here it is. They said, were you nervous for the first time? What was your favorite podcast? How do you think of your titles? How long have you been podcasting, and how many times do you record? Okay, so I'm going to start at the top. Was I nervous the first time? Yes. We actually did a beta podcast, which just means a practice podcast, and we shared it with people. And I believe that both of us were nervous. What do you think, Mike? Were you nervous too?
I was a little nervous, I guess.
Yeah. And so my favorite podcast, I have this podcast that I really like. It's called Pod Save America, and I was hooked onto that by Mike. How do we think of titles? Mike is very creative. So I'm going to give him credit for that. How long have you been podcasting? You know, this is our first podcast.
3 weeks.
Yeah, so we've really only been doing it for a very short time, but it feels very natural. It's not as hard as you would think it would be. It's really about a conversation that you have. How many times do you record? Well, we record usually on the weekends. One time we try to just do it all in one kind of take. So we do have a lot of mistakes and a lot of things get cut out, right, Mike?
Especially this time.
Exactly. All right, Mike, what do you think?
I thought a lot about this nervous question because I have a weird tick. I get nervous speaking in front of big groups of adults. I'm a teacher. So teaching in front of kids, speaking in front of kids is fine. I don't get nervous about doing that. I was nervous the first time, I stood in front of a classroom, but after that was fine. But speaking in front of big groups of adults, I get nervous, like really nervous. So one of the things I've been trying to do over the last few years is speak in front of big groups of adults. I was not nervous for this at all. Well, I mean, a little, but nervous in other ways, nervous about how it would go, how smooth it would be, that kind of stuff, technical things, more than the aspect of talking. Anyone who knows me knows that I can talk till I'm blue in the face with people in small groups, one-on-one, whatever. I have lots of opinions. And so speaking to small people groups is really easy for me. And this is me just staring at my computer screen, talking to Glen. So it's pretty easy. So Glenn stole my answer for my favorite podcast.
Sorry.
And so now I'm going to say that my second favorite podcast is The Weeds. It's a Vox Media podcast. It is heavy into politics and policy. It's for people who really want to learn how government works, in particular the American government. I am super into U.S. politics. And so The Weeds is my fix for that. Titles, well, frankly, we don't even have an answer to that in terms of what this episode title is going to be yet. But you just think about what you're talking about and try to find a good title. How long have I been podcasting? Like I said, about Glen, about 3 weeks, and we record once a week. Glen covered this. From Sammy, Evan, and Kayla. What do you do when you can't speak, and how do you start the podcast? Well, I don't know what exactly you guys mean by how do you start the podcast, but starting a podcast in terms of like creating one has to start with an idea. You have to know what you're going to talk about and be passionate about that thing. I think it's really important to be, I don't want to say you have to be an expert at it, but you certainly have to be confident in what you're saying and how you're saying it. One of the things that makes Glen and I's conversations about education and technology in particular in video games is that we're really knowledgeable about this stuff. So we don't need like this huge outline of data and information and a script. We can just talk back and forth and say all of the things that we need to say. And what happens when you can't speak? Well, Jake, our engineer, cuts out those parts. That's a joke. I tend to get stage fright, like I said, in front of big groups of adults in particular. But you got to power through it. This is one of those things where you got to stretch yourself. You got to push yourself a little bit to do the things that you're uncomfortable with, so that you become more comfortable with them, and eventually it becomes second nature. Never be afraid to push your own boundaries, kids, so that you can go and do these really interesting things that you were once afraid of doing, for sure.
I really like that question about you can't. What happens if you have stage frights? You can't speak. I think that the biggest thing that I do when I speak to adults is just exactly what you just said, Mike. That's probably the biggest fear factor. I'm actually going to be doing that this Thursday and Friday. Friday and Saturday, to big groups of adults who want to learn about gamification, for example. And what I do right from the beginning is I make fun of myself, so I can get laughing and I can just have a conversation with my crowd versus feeling like I have to be nervous about presenting. I'm just talking and I'm having a conversation. So I pretend I'm just talking to you, like you, Mike, or just a friend, and really just sharing of ideas, and I don't have to be the super duper expert, but I want to share my passion with other people. And that's what you should do too. To start a podcast, what are you passionate about? Can you talk about it? Start a podcast. Boom, you can get going with that.
Just as long as it's not about education. Don't start a podcast about education.
Yeah, that would be bad because they would compete against us. No, I'm just kidding. You can do that too. It's fine. So our next question is from Jack, Justin, and Javon. And they ask a series of questions here. How hard is it to do as far as a podcast? Do you like doing the podcast? How do you get your audience hooked for the whole time? Why do you make the podcast? And how do you end the podcast? And do we follow a script? Oh, this is really, really good questions, by the way. Yes. Is it hard to do? It is not hard to do, but it takes time to do it. We do like doing it, of course, because that's why we're passionate about sharing our ideas. How do we get the audience hooked? We try to break it up into different segments and talk about interesting topics. Why did we even do this? Because we thought it was something that was lacking in education. We wanted to have an opportunity for people to share ideas and for us to be able to give a platform to teachers and even students like you guys to be able to share their ideas. And do we follow a script? Yes, we have a script. Our script doesn't contain everything. Like for right now, for example, right now, I just read the questions from a script, but I didn't have all of my responses of how I was going to answer that. So what do you think, Mike?
So I did like that script question because one of the things that I read when I did a lot of research on, actually, frankly, some of these questions was the value of an outline. So our outline actually, I'm staring at it right now. It's 7 pages long. So we have a 7-page outline for this podcast. And it is full. There's no pictures. It's lots of writing. We work on this outline starting basically the day after we're done recording the previous podcast. Glen and I go back and forth, editing it, adding things, removing things. We write comments. We use Google Docs so that we can collaborate on it in real time at the same time. Glen and I are both in this outline literally right now. He can type in it while I'm answering this question, and I could see him typing. And that is what makes this. He's literally doing it right now. I knew he was going to do it. I almost actually set him up for that. It's really distracting me now. So how hard is it to do? I'm working pretty hard. This is something I really wanted to do. I'm pretty passionate about it. I think that you will get you'll get a really good quality product if you put a lot of effort into it. And so it is hard to do. So thank you guys, Liberty Benton Middle School and Melissa, for asking those questions. We love to answer questions, and we will answer them as often as possible. Answering student questions is even better, and it's a fabulous experience for us, and hopefully it was for them. We can talk about technology, school, gaming. We can talk more about Fortnite, kids, if you want. So we'd love to hear from you. All you have to do is head to OnEducationPodcast.com. At the bottom of the page is a form. Send us your questions. We'll read them on air. Pretty simple. We'd like to thank Joe Lynch for being on the pod today and Melissa Stanton's class at Liberty Benton Middle School for sending in those great questions. On Education is a on-podcast media production. My name is Mike Washburn. My co-host is Glen Irvin. Our audio engineer is Jake Codewise. You can reach him at JK Radio. You can get in touch with us or ask us questions to answer on air by visiting our website, OnEducationPodcast.com. You can tweet us at OnEducationPod. Glenn is at Irv Spanish on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at Mr. Washburn. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/OnEducationPod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we'd be honored if you'd share it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or the Google Play Store. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Schoology, for supporting us. Check out Schoology.com to learn how they can help you advance what's possible. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome. See you soon.